Suck it up. Don't be soft. No pain, no gain. Tough it out. By a show of hands, how many of you have heard these or similar phrases in sport? Right? Me too. I've seen how these words have become the soundtrack of sport, and I've heard them echoing through locker rooms. When I work with athletes, I see them internalize these words, shaping how they think, feel, and perform. In sport, relentless toughness is often glorified, while struggling with setbacks is often seen as weakness. But what if the culture of sport has it wrong? What if the real competitive edge isn't about pushing harder, but about how we treat ourselves when things get tough? From youth tournaments to national championships to the Olympic arena, we've all watched athletes push themselves to the edge of human possibility. But what lies at the edge of that mindset? Let me tell you a story about little Leah. Little Leah is what my brother endearingly calls me. Little Leah was a young dancer, and from the outside, she looked unstoppable. Front and center in every routine, the one her teachers called on to demonstrate new steps, and the one chosen for solos and competitions. She earned the highest marks on her dance exams. Yep, little Leah was pretty good. And if you asked anyone around little Leah, her family, friends, or dance classmates, they likely would have said that she was an absolute success. But on the inside, it was a very different story. I didn't see little Leah as an absolute success. In fact, every tiny misstep felt catastrophic. Even when judges gave me top scores, I was convinced I wasn't good enough. My inner critic was relentless. Try harder. You're not good enough. Be better. Don't mess up. I thought that inner voice that was constantly criticizing me was my fuel, the thing I needed to be great. But really, it was draining me. Let me share an example with you. When I was about 13 years old, I was selected to perform a solo at a competition. And after months of meticulously perfecting my routine, competition day had arrived. I remember being backstage before it was my turn to compete and feeling that anticipatory excitement bubbling up inside of me. As I was backstage, I was watching the dancer perform before me, whom, just like something straight out of a movie, just happened to be the dancer I viewed as the epitome of excellence. Flawless and confident, you know the kind. All of a sudden, I found myself beginning to drown in a pool of self-doubt. Why am I here? I can't do this. I'll never be as good as she is. I don't belong here. By the time I stepped on stage, I had already lost. I performed fine, but not my best, and I certainly didn't win gold. Because self-criticism doesn't fuel greatness. It sabotages it. If I had cared for myself in that moment instead of tearing myself down, little Leah would have been better. And not just as a competitor, but as a human. Knowing what I know now, turns out some self-compassion is what I really needed. My experiences as a young dancer inspired my research career. And for the past 20 years, I've been studying sports psychology, asking one big question. What if athletes didn't tear themselves down when things got tough? What if they treated themselves with compassion instead? So what is self-compassion? Self-compassion is being there for yourself when the going gets tough. Just as we can have compassion for others who are going through a difficult time by recognizing their suffering and wanting to alleviate it, self-compassion is about extending the same kind, caring support to ourselves when we are struggling. And here's the kicker. Self-compassion doesn't lower standards. It doesn't make us less competitive or less driven. It simply changes how we respond when things get hard. At this point, some of you might be thinking, If athletes are compassionate with themselves, won't they get soft? Won't they settle for good enough and lose their competitive edge? This is a fair question, especially in a culture that tends to tell athletes to win at all costs. But self-compassion doesn't mean swapping your training for bubble baths and Netflix. In fact, our research shows that athletes with greater self-compassion take more initiative, not less. In our research, we've worked with athletes competing at every level, from local leagues all the way up to international competition. And here's what we've found. Self-compassion helps athletes rebound more effectively after a setback, have greater resilience and motivation, and set appropriate expectations for future performances. Through interviews we've held with athletes, they've told us that self-compassion offers a competitive edge to improve their performance and that it's essential for their success. In some studies, we've asked athletes to reflect on real setbacks, missed shots, injuries, crushing defeats, and then guided them through self-compassion exercises, such as writing supportive statements to themselves or reframing harsh self-talk. What we've found is that we can teach athletes to be self-compassionate. And this is great news, given self-compassion predicts less burnout and greater coping and striving for excellence. Now, here's the takeaway I want you to remember. Self-compassion isn't weakness. It's competitive advantage. Think about it. When you fail and beat yourself up, do you perform better next time? Or do you spiral because you're stuck on what went wrong? Imagine two basketball players, both miss a critical shot. For the rest of the game, one thinks, I'm useless, I always choke. The other one thinks, that was tough, I'll learn and move on. Which one do you think is more ready for the next play? Our research suggests the second one, because self-compassion keeps athletes focused on improvement instead of harsh self-criticism, which really is the very thing that can derail their performance. In addition to being a sports psychology researcher, I work with athletes as a certified mental performance consultant. This includes, don't worry about it. I don't think my parents know what it means either. Essentially, I help athletes navigate the ups and downs of sport. This includes managing performance pressure and anxiety, recovering from failures and mistakes, and teaching them mental skills, such as imagery and focus control. One of the most powerful tools I teach, self-compassion. What's quite interesting about self-compassion is that we're quick to have compassion for others, but often struggle to have it for ourselves. In my consulting work, I often walk athletes through an exercise where I invite them to imagine a teammate who is having a tough time, struggling in some way. And I get them to share with me what they would say to their teammate. They come up with things like, don't sweat it, you'll get the next one. Or, take a breath, reset, you've got this. Then I ask them to tell me what they say to themselves in the same situation. And that's the light bulb moment, when I get to witness their realization that the things they say to themselves and the harsh tone they take with themselves is something they would never say or do to their teammate. Getting to witness this light bulb moment is one of the most fulfilling parts of my work, and often the start to many athletes' journey of viewing self-compassion as their competitive edge. When athletes make that shift, I've seen them apply self-compassion to navigate injuries, handle international level pressure, and come back stronger after crushing defeats. When I witness them performing in this new way, these athletes aren't lowering their standards. They're raising their game by caring for themselves. So here's my invitation. Let's rewrite the playbook. To athletes, what if your inner voice was your greatest ally, not your harshest critic? To coaches, what if your athletes knew that caring for themselves was part of competing well? To all of us, what if compassion became a part of the game plan at every level, from community clubs all the way to the Olympic stage? Let's imagine a compassionate sports system where care and excellence coexist. Because when we stop beating ourselves and each other down, we create space for athletes to truly thrive on and off the court. More and more athletes are speaking up about their struggles in sport, signaling a shift we desperately need. Take Canadian tennis player Bianca Andreescu, for example. At 19, she stunned the world by defeating the legendary Serena Williams and winning the US Open. But after that triumph came escalating pressures and injuries. And she shared openly online that she didn't have enough love for herself beyond being a tennis player. As a result, she stepped away from the sport for over a year to focus on her mental health. And today, she uses meditation and gratitude exercises to stay grounded. This is the kind of courage I think we need from athletes and the systems around them. This brings me back to little Leah, standing backstage, knocking herself down one harsh criticism after another. How different that experience and her dance career could have been if self-compassion was a normalized part of sport back then. And today, when I think about the next generation of little Leahs out there, like my nieces and nephews pictured here, I want them to have self-compassion and to enter sports systems that lift them up, not tear them down. Systems where striving and kindness go hand in hand. Look at these faces. Would you tell them, suck it up, tough it out, you're not good enough? Would you want them saying that to themselves? Let's reimagine a sport culture where athletes rise, not because they're harder on themselves, but because they know how to treat themselves with compassion when it matters most. Because self-compassion isn't soft, it's strategic, and it might just be the competitive edge we've been missing.